We are now calling the police.
He attended 300 meters, more than 300 meters away from the Country Hills Library. He was in the middle of an intersection, and he used a microphone and was street preaching, as he normally does.
Okay.
That was considered to be a breach because they were concerned that people who could have been driving to the event might have heard them. These are very broad conditions. It's a very generous finding of breach by the judge yesterday, and it's an unfortunate decision.
Adam Soos here for Rebel News. Pastor Derek Reimer made national and international headlines when he was arrested for protesting drag queen story hours at public libraries in Calgary. These are events in which men garishly disguised as women inexplicably feel the need to be reading to small children at public libraries. Well, since those protests, this embattled pastor has been involved in a litany of cases. He has secured victories on charges for trespassing and causing a disturbance, charges that were dropped that stemmed from him daring to pray at City Hall, and for daring to read the Bible in public. He also secured a minor victory this week when he was acquitted of an additional charge of causing a disturbance. But during those same proceedings, he was also found guilty on charges of criminal harassment as well as a breach of bail conditions from incidents that took place at Saddletown and Country Hills libraries in late March and early April 2023. Pastor Derek is also awaiting sentencing on these charges as well as rulings on a number of other court proceedings in the coming weeks. I was very fortunate to be joined by Pastor Derek's legal counsel, Andrew MacKenzie, for an update on the latest ruling. You know, I guess just first off, maybe for folks who aren't entirely familiar with the story of Pastor Derek Reimer, if you could just talk a little bit about how this all started with these drag queen story hour protests.
Well, in early 2023, Pastor Reimer developed a concern with the drag queen stars, as many individuals did. He decided that he would be a little bit active against it. He led some protests against it. There were some at private institutions, and there were some at public libraries. So he went to a protest at one of the public libraries in Calgary. When he went to protest, he entered, and he made his opinion known. He said homosexuality is wrong. He said that they will not inherit heaven, that kind of thing. Some of the recent news articles in the mainstream media, they're suggesting he used slurs. I don't think he used any slurs, for what that's worth. This ended by him physically getting thrown out of the room. There's video of that. I believe Rebel's shown that video before, of him getting thrown out. He was the one who received charges for that. He received charges for causing a disturbance, for mischief, and he was remanded for that, which means he was put in jail for that. So he was jailed for a while for that. When he eventually agreed, they held him for long enough. He agreed to sign bail conditions he did not think was fair. He signed conditions saying that he would not go within a certain radius of these events. He signed the conditions that he would not contact any of the individuals involved again.
Right.
And he abided by those conditions. He did not go within the radius, and he did not contact the individuals. Yet, the trial that just finished, he was convicted of breaching those conditions. And the condition that he was convicted of breaching just yesterday, he was convicted because he contacted a library organizer. His conditions, they're supposed to be very precisely worded.
Yeah. They
said, don't contact any participants. Then in brackets it says, performers or spectators. He contacted the person who organized it. You know, maybe she rubber stamps it. She's the one who gives the approval for it to go ahead.
Right.
He contacted her. This was considered a breach.
So, and just to confirm for folks out there, because there are a number of sort of legal proceedings. So there's a number of initial incidents with Seton and some other libraries. And then these latest breach terms after that, they stem from instances at, is it Saddletown and Country Hills libraries? Is that what they're discussing?
That's right. So those are 3 different public libraries here in Calgary. The first incident was at one of the libraries, and they do these events. They call them reading with royalty events, and that's what they call the drag queens and kings and those people. They had those events all over Calgary. So his initial arrest was at that one library, Seton, that's right. He had a separate trial for that. That trial ran in May of this year. There's going to be a decision that's issued on his disturbance and mischief charges. That decision is going to come in September of this year.
Right.
Right now, the decision just came down for his protests at, you're right, the Saddletown Library and the Country Hills Library. He attended the Saddletown Library, in which he talked to the library organizer. He attended 300 meters, more than 300 meters away from the Country Hills Library. He was in the middle of an intersection, and he used a microphone and was street preaching as he normally does.
Okay.
That was considered to be a breach because they were concerned that people who could have been driving to the event might have heard them. These are very broad conditions. It's a very generous finding of breach by the judge yesterday, and it's an unfortunate decision.
So we will cover, of course, the original findings when those are brought to light in September, as you mentioned there. But on these specific charges, so he was basically he was acquitted on the charge of a disturbance. Let's talk a little bit though about the charges that he was found guilty on or convicted of. So it was criminal harassment. Was the first one, and then the breach we just discussed. What's the criminal harassment portion about?
The criminal harassment was that there were considered to be 2 or 3 repeated communications with who the person who's not the victim. This is the library manager of the Saddletown Library. So he went to the library one day. He asked, "May I speak to the manager?" He made his feelings known to the manager. If you'd like to see it, the full video of that is public. It's been made public this whole time. It's on Mr. Reimer's Facebook page.
Yeah.
Do you think it's appropriate to have, pervert grooming sessions going on here,
You know
corrupting
what?
children?
I find that really offensive. We offer programs for children. We focus on age-appropriate programs.
Right.
And I'm not going to have a conversation.
You know what I
where you're
find
going to say
offensive?
that.
Corrupting kids.
Yeah,
That's
you
what I
know
find
what?
offensive.
This conversation is over.
And we're going to make this public, and your name's going to be out there, and that's not going to be good for this
you are
library.
welcome to threaten me.
It's
That
not
is
a
your-
threat, but we
that
want
is
to
your
hold you
option,
accountable.
but I'm
People
going to
that are
end
hosting
this
these pervert
conversation,
grooming
and
hours.
I'm going to ask you to leave.
I'll leave. That's fine.
Yep. Can you
But
leave?
you need to be held accountable for the choices that you're making.
You can watch the entirety of that interaction. He tells her that what he thinks about the event. She doesn't like what he has to say. She says, "This conversation is over. Please leave." He leaves immediately.
Okay.
Yet, and he posts this video on his Facebook. After the video is posted on his Facebook, somebody messages this library manager. 3 words to the message: "Shame on you." That's it. These are the repeated... Somebody else completely different. These are the repeated communications that the court found constituted criminal harassment against Mr. Reimer.
So the breach terms, it doesn't quite seem from what you're saying. It's a very, as you mentioned, generous finding to suggest he breached. And then those are the sole grounds for the criminal harassment charge. Needless to say, I find that problematic. Is this going to be appealed?
An appeal, it would be an interesting appeal. If an appeal does go ahead, it's in Mr. Reimer's court right now as to whether he wants to appeal. But I think an appeal hopefully would bring a little bit more to light in this case.
Now, is this in any way, shape, or form? Obviously, it is connected. The court proceedings have advanced, but could these outcomes be in any way binding or set a precedent for other rulings and sentencings that are going to be coming with regards to the other ongoing legal matters?
That's certainly the concern. The concern is that this dramatically lowers the standard for what constitutes harassment. Harassment, I said at a case when I was arguing, there's an individual who killed someone's husband, showed up at her house after the fact, left her numerous messages, packages, acquitted. Her fear of this person was not found to be reasonable. Yeah. Yet, this library manager was found to have a reasonable fear for her safety after the interaction in which any member of the public can watch this interaction in full on Mr. Reimer's Facebook page, and they can make up their minds for themselves as to whether that would have caused a reasonable fear in the library manager's mind. That wasn't my submission.
Now, I suppose my last question for you, what is the potential, obviously this could be amalgamated with some of the other charges you don't know, but what could the potential sentencing be for what we've discussed so far? Are we going to see Pastor Derek Reimer arrested again for this? Is it contingent on the other charges? Is he going back behind bars? What are we expecting presently?
We're in unprecedented territory, I would say. I wouldn't make any predictions, wouldn't make any guesses. I'd like for this to follow what happens in other cases. Yeah. But this is an unusual case, and it was an unusual decision in my opinion. We'll see what happens. I'm not going to make any predictions.
If you want to help support Pastor Derek Reimer's legal defense, you can do so by making a tax receipt eligible donation to the Democracy Fund at savepastorderek.com.